Moving on, we have our next session on the topic, The World is Our Workplace, Hybrid or Anywhere Working. Take a deep dive to understand the sustainable workplaces of the future. Witness the leaders' debate on the importance of working from the office versus why working from home is equally productive. Our speakers for this session, and all four of our speakers will be joining us virtually, are Hamish Badenoch, Global Head, Future of Work and Real Estate Transformation, Deutsche Bank; Sameer Raje, General Manager and Head India and SAARC Region, Zoom; Shelley Boland, Head of Property, Asia Pacific, Standard Chartered. Moderating the session, we have with us this evening Shalini Lal, founder Unqbe. Shalini helps leaders build the organization that they dream of through a strong leadership team, supportive culture, and effective organizational design. Shalini's focus is on its impact on people and organizations. A lifelong learner and educator, she hosts a LinkedIn Live session every Saturday on different aspects of the future of work. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them all a big round of applause as we invite them to this summit. And I'd like to hand the mic over to Shalini.
Thank you, Justin, for such a wonderful conversation on cultures of the future. We're now entering a very interesting and a very topical discussion on what the future of work looks like. Is it hybrid? Is it work from anywhere? Or are we going to see some version of back to office? And I have to say that as a researcher, educator, and advisor on the future of work, this is a conversation that's particularly close to my heart. I have amazing guests with me today, and I'm going to request each of you to introduce yourselves. Sameer?
Hi, this is Sameer Raje, General Manager and Head of India and SAARC region for Zoom. And I've been here for the last 3 years, kickstarted the operations for Zoom in India.
Thanks, Sameer. Hamish?
Hi there, my name's Hamish Badenoch, and I am Head of the Future of Work and Real Estate Transformation at Deutsche Bank, a role which I have been in since its creation shortly after the pandemic started in 2020.
Thanks, Hamish. Shelley?
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. My name's Shelley Boland. I'm based in Hong Kong, and I'm the Head of Corporate Real Estate for Asia Pacific for Standard Chartered Bank, along with the Global Head of Real Estate for our Consumer, Private and Business Banking, CPBB business. I've been at the organisation just coming up to about 7 years now.
Wow. Thank you. I have such an amazing set of co-panelists. I can't wait to dive into the discussion. So let me start by asking you for what your thoughts are as people who are deeply embedded in some of these conversations for your own organizations, or perhaps for, in some ways, other organizations as well. What do you think is going to be the future of work? Do you see it as hybrid? Do you see it as some form of work from anywhere? Or do you think we're going to see some form of back to office?
Great. Let me sort of tackle that first, perhaps by giving a brief overview of how we're approaching it at Deutsche Bank. So for some context, Deutsche Bank, 80,000 employees, based across 50 countries, about 100 offices. And we've got a super diverse workforce, everything from traders in London to, operations teams in India, HR professionals in Singapore, corporate financiers in New York. So as an organization, when we think about the future of work and working models, what we have tried to establish is something that we can deliver across such a diverse organization. And I think when we think about what the model of the future is, or what the model is that any organization is doing now, it's critical to understand what is the organization that you're starting with. That what might be right for one organization, such as a global organization, 80,000 employees doing regulated activities, may be very different from what works for another type of organization. At Deutsche Bank, we're fully committed to a hybrid working model. As soon as the pandemic hit, we set up a management board sponsored initiative to actually explore how we could adapt our organization in response to clear sort of structural trends in terms of what people expect. And we've landed very firmly on a hybrid model We want to give people the flexibility that increased remote working provides. And I think the pandemic has proven that people can work very effectively in a more remote model. But we're also fully committed to retaining the concept of the office as a place where people can come together. So yes, it's about giving people a degree of remote flexibility, but also recognizing the continued importance of the office as a place to connect, to collaborate, to build culture, and to learn. Exactly how things will evolve in the short to medium term, I think is anybody's guess. But our focus at the moment is very much on how do we make hybrid working work for our organization, rather than trying to second guess how it may evolve in the future. Make the current model work, and then obviously adapt and recalibrate it as we potentially see kind of ways of working change over the coming years.
Thanks, Hamish. I absolutely love the fact that you pointed out that there might be different solutions that are likely to work for organizations of different levels of complexity, different perhaps operations, different size. I also, want to highlight what you said about it being fluid. So your focus on what do we do to make the hybrid model successful today, and that's the future will sort of evolve from there. Samir, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. First and foremost, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And, at Zoom, we are probably in a very unique situation, and we've been through a very unique situation. And why is that? Because point number one is, as an organization, we underwent a very similar thing what Hamish was alluding to just now. And we are still going through it, right? We grew at a very rapid pace in the last 2 years or so. And this kind of growth was unprecedented. It was unheard of in the IT industry. We went from an employee base of 2,000 to close to about 6,000 in just a short span when hiring, recruitment, and expanding teams within the confinements of homes was. As we transitioned from there to a fast-paced and a large organization. The second challenge what we have, or the second thing which we underwent, is because we are the technology enablers for companies like maybe Deutsche Bank and rest of the organizations, and trying to solve the problems what Hamish just alluded to, right? I mean, just imagine the plight, because we don't know what is right now and what is hybrid. What is hybrid? Is hybrid 3 days in office or 3 days at home or 4 days to work out? But if we get to the bottom of it and we get to the crux of it, the key factor is it's about empowerment. It's about choice to the employees, because the employees today have realized the benefits of working from home. Everybody knows that. I mean, I can spend more time with my family, and there are uncountable benefits which I have seen in the last 2 years, and I have been productive myself. So that's one aspect. But the second main element is that the cost of living is going up. The fuel prices are rocketing sky high. The cost of living is going. And why do I need to spend 2 hours sitting in my car, stuck in a traffic, burning fuel, going absolutely nowhere, right? I can be so productive attending a meeting. So that thoughts are creeping up, moving to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, and bringing my cost of living. That's another point. So employees are re-looking at this, and they are now emboldened. They're feeling more empowered that, yes, I have this choice. Why can't I explore options of, going in a smaller city and probably reduce my cost of living, and rightfully so. So what is hybrid? Hybrid is basically, empowering the employers as well as employee, and as a technology enabler that we have to balance both. Because when you are in office, right, you have to be in office sometimes. Maybe some of the employees, maybe, shop floor workers, maybe healthcare workers, they need to be in laboratories. They cannot be at home. And similarly, when they're meeting somebody else, how do we ensure there is inclusion? How do we ensure that, there is technologies like Zoom is trying to achieve it? And that's what the transition we ourselves have been through in the last 2 years and have achieved. So we've transitioned completely for being just a meeting application to a complete collaboration platform. And we are trying to help organizations work in more and more these flexible manner, empowering the employer as well as the employees on both ends. And it's a new world, I would say, new age of working. I don't know what hybrid is actually, but hybrid is basically, according to me, it's more of empowering the employees and giving them the choice.
Thanks, Samir. You are in this unique position where, you have a very different vantage point from many of us. You have, of course, your Zoom experience of how, very naturally and for all the right reasons, the organization has really expanded and taken off, and your own experience, but you also have the vantage point of what's happening across the world. And thank you for many of those observations on particularly some of the challenges that are coming up. And we're going to come back to them as we get deeper into the conversation. Shelley, what are you seeing at StanChart as some of the ideas around future of work?
Yeah, thanks, Shalini, for the opportunity. Similar to Hamish, to give you some context, got around 85,000 employees globally, largely based in Asia Pacific, but then a strong footprint in Europe, Americas, Africa, and Middle East. So you can see it's quite a diverse population that we've been offering flexibility to. It's quite well known that the bank took a very bold stand on flexible working, which we announced during the pandemic in 2020. And we very much wanted this to be reinforcing our overall employee value proposition. It's very much for us, not only something to provide choice to our employees, not only around where they work, but when they work and how they work, but also to give them the opportunity to look at their career development, look at how we can attract and retain talent. And I think for us, flexible working, we've noticed the attitude shift. It's become such a big factor for people considering an organisation as part of their career journey. For us, we've probably got around 68% of the organisation that are in true flexible working contracts. And we've also added another opportunity to give choice to our staff through a near home solution partnership with IWG. And that allows people that need something closer to their home base, but perhaps are finding commuting a challenge, they have the ability through the Standard Charter Partnership to use an IWG space globally to be able to work for a period of time. So we've tried to offer a menu of options to really go back to that choice, where you work, how you work, and when you work. And so at the moment, almost 58,000 of our colleagues across 28 markets are operating in this environment, with the remaining markets to roll out sort of over the end of 2022 and closing in 2023. So for us, it's been very much a learning journey. I think one of the things that's been touched on is with some of our markets coming out of the pandemic environment, we have had the question around the return to work. And I think it's still, we see the office as a part of that choice. We also see it as an important part of the team collaboration and connection. So I think as real estate, we've played a really big role in creating those environments to allow us to come back to the office, but perhaps work in a different way and perhaps connect with our clients in a different way, which is why our friends such as Zoom who are on the phone today as also really key to enable that connection as things have really changed.
Thanks, Shelley. And the two things that you said that really struck out for me. One, of course, the very innovative idea of tie-ups with IWG, and therefore, it's like what form can work from anywhere take that works for your employees. I also want to pick on something you said, and actually just a while back, Samir also spoke about. You've added flexible working as part of your employee value proposition itself, and you think that that's going to be a key component of what will make your organization attractive. So let me ask you, and this is an open question, Do you think employee expectations have actually shifted over the last couple of years on where and how they want to work? And has it shifted across the world, or is it more so in some parts than others?
I think employee expectations have fundamentally shifted. I think, what we saw at Deutsche Bank in terms of flexible working patterns was generally represented in other large corporates. Pre-pandemic, perhaps you had approximately 10% of people on some kind of remote working model. We've now moved to a position where 80% of our employees are adopting some kind of flexible model. And what is really striking is the global consistency of that. It's across, from the US to Germany to India. And not only is that consistent across geography, it's actually consistent across every other demographic metric. It's consistent across age group, it's consistent across corporate title, it's consistent across gender. So I think there has been a structural shift in people's expectations. And we see that in every data point you look at, whether it's every conference you go to, every dinner party you go to at the school gate, what's your flexible working model? Every time we're recruiting people, what's your flexible working model? So I think, I know there are some organizations that believe, that flexible working is an aberration. Our view, sounds similar to sort of Standard Chartered, is that actually what we are seeing is a structural change in the way in which people work, which is long overdue, which has been facilitated through technologies like Zoom for a number of years, but it's really the pandemic which has created that catalyst. So I think it is very, our view, we've made a conviction call, is that we will not go back to traditional 5 days in the office for all employees. I guess what is unknown is, the hybrid model that we're adopting of 2 to 3 days in the office. To what extent is that going to evolve into fully remote? Are we seeing a transition to hybrid with an important role for the office, or will we over time essentially see the death of the office? We believe it's the former, but I think the idea that we will ever go back to 5 days a week in the office, I think employees' expectations have just so fundamentally changed that in our view is highly, highly unlikely.
Hamish, I love what you said about not just how much they've changed, your 10-90 versus now 80-20 sort of, statistics, but also the fact that in your data, you found that this is equally true across the world and across demographic profiles. Samir, I'm going to come to you. With your vantage point at Zoom, are you seeing something similar? What has shifted in terms of employee expectations? Is flexible working becoming, central to the employee value proposition, key to attracting good talent? And how does this shift, map out across the world in different demographies?
Sure, and let me bring in a very different element to what Hamish mentioned. And that element we often forget because it's a key influencer on the employee psychology. And there is, even our consumers are changing. They have changed. They have adopted to the new world in how they are buying, how they want to adopt our services, how they want to procure our services, and even seeking support. And that mindset is also impacting the employees, because today a consumer is no longer, is reluctant to go to a store, is more comfortable buying online, demanding services online, looking at social media to raise support requests, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, it's so easy for a customer today to not go to a helpline and go to a social media and rant about it. It becomes such an inflamed issue in such a short time, right? So the consumer mindset has changed. They end up buying things or demanding service or doing a transaction in between probably two official meetings, or just probably feeding the child somewhere. Now, that is the kind of mindset which is coming from consumer, and that is impacting the employees also on the other hand. That needs to be factored in. If the consumer has changed so much and the organization internal environment is not keeping up to it, if the employees are not given the choice of application, choice of tools, flexibility, empowerment, if that is not given, there's definitely going to be a resentment. And this is what is changing. So overall, the entire ecosystem has changed in the last 2 years, where adoption of digital tools, digital technology has accelerated, and that has impacted both the employees as well as the consumers. And obviously, it's extremely important to keep the employees happy to ensure that the customers are happy, right? And that can happen only and only if the employees are empowered. So I would look at it from a holistic angle because it's a change of the entire environment. It's not just that the employees are demanding and are feeling the need to change, but it's also the consumer who has changed, the market that has changed, and the way they are consuming, demanding services and support is very different compared to what it was probably 2.5 years back.
Thanks, Samir. But before you leave, I want to come back to the second question. Do you see this shift as, even across the world and across demographies?
Well, absolutely. And if I have to give you an Indian context, forget about the global context, but if I have to give you an Indian context, even the rural markets, rural areas where adoption of technology was low, even connectivity was poor, right? If you're talking about tier 3 cities and so on and so forth, that has seen so much of an uptake. Forget about the developed countries and the key metro areas. So I think, yes, it is not only global, but employees are now looking to move out to, very remote satellite towns and have a peaceful life because they realize that the quality of time that they give with their families is much different compared to living in a metro. And of course, the resources and rest of the stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Samir. Shelley, I'm going to move to something you said a little while back, and you spoke about, how flexible working is part of your employee value proposition, but you also spoke about, your thoughts around redesigning office. And I'd love to hear from you, what are some of your emerging thoughts around what will the office space be used for? What is going to be fundamentally different from the office, as the pandemic nears its end, I hope, versus as the office was before we moved into the pandemic?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And I suppose Hamish was touching on it before about the role of the office. And you really now need to think about what are the reasons for our colleagues to actually want to come back to the office and work together in person. I mean, over the past few years, we have all proven that you can work relatively productive in a hybrid or remote environment. The external factors have almost forced us to try. But we also heard from our colleagues that they really think that face-to-face interaction is equally important, especially if you look at it from an inclusivity perspective, but also the ability to collaborate with colleagues, clients, and the broader community. I mean, just as recent as last week, we held a town hall with a number of our colleagues in Asia Pacific and asked an audience via a live poll what would motivate them to come back to the office. And I think that number one answer is around being the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues better. And number two, closely followed, was the face-to-face and events. So we do see that our employees, while they are enjoying the flexibility, they are missing those in-person interactions. And I suppose, what does that mean from a corporate real estate perspective? It has asked us to consider what is the physical presence in an environment that's going to unlock that. So I think the design of the future is much more around being quite bespoke around the type of work you do when you come to the office, whether it's quite individual focused areas, where it's large face-to-face collaboration meeting areas. It obviously needs to now have an integrated technology solution because not all of the teams are together in person. So we need to be able to seamlessly connect in a virtual environment. And it does need to offer those facilities to support the wellbeing environment. And that comes with everything from health, fitness, food and beverage, through to spaces for time out and recharge. So I think it has really enabled us as corporate real estate individuals to take a client-centric approach and convert the traditional, sort of rows and rows of desks and large offices and physical space restrictions into a very open, collaborative, and very inviting place that you want to come back to and spend time with your colleagues.
Thanks, Shelley. Hamish, I'm going to ask you some of what I asked Shelley as well. What will the office look like? In what fundamental ways is it different? And I'd love it if you can also address, a couple of points that Shelley made. One, that, the focus is going to be on inclusion. How will that play out? And collaboration, how will that play out?
Sure. So I think the office clearly needs to be different, and I think all companies are rethinking the design of that office. In practical terms, what it means for us at Deutsche Bank is we're sort of transitioning offices which were maybe kind of traditionally sort of 90% desks, 10% collaboration areas, through to a minimum of 70% desks, 30% collaboration areas, and in certain kind of more where it's suitable for the functions that are using it, actually looking more at 30% desks and 70% collaboration areas. Because what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to encourage your employees when they're in the office to be using the time to connect, not to do personal work. And as Shelley alluded to, it's also critical about how you think about the technology that facilitates that. And that's not just about the platforms such as Zoom, but also about the hardware. So we're moving all of our employees away towards laptops. And actually the laptops is not primarily about connectivity when you're at home, but it's actually about enabling you to be flexible when you're in the office, so that you can, because one of the challenges we've had historically is where we've put in place collaboration spaces, they're not particularly well utilized because people feel tethered to their computer. Whereas once people have laptops or other mobile devices, they can make better use of the space. I think what though is super important is, real estate, technology are all important enablers of giving the office purpose, but actually the role of managers and of employees in adopting the correct behaviors is absolutely critical. And one of the sort of ways in which we've evolved our thinking over the 2 years, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about activity-based working, and you come into the office to collaborate. The problem is, or the fact is, that after now 2 years of solid remote working, a lot of employees say, well, I don't need to come into the office to collaborate because I've been collaborating really effectively in a fully remote environment. So we've, as sort of Shelley alludes to, kind of also at Deutsche Bank, really shifted it to connectivity. You come into the office to connect in order to have those personal sort of touch points that we believe cannot be fully replicated in a digital environment. And so we're doing a lot of work with teams, with managers, to make them think sort of very intentionally about, when I'm in the office, how do I plan my work? How do I make the best use of my time to increase the connectivity? Because if you spend an hour and a half commuting or an hour commuting and you just sit in the office doing exactly the same thing as you've done in a remote environment, then that's not a good use of your time. And of course, you're going to think, why am I bothering coming into the office? However, if you come in, you have a team meeting, you have a one-on-one with your manager, you bump into someone in the canteen and you discover about something which else has been going on in the organization, then the office feels a really valuable experience, and it is adding value. And that's what we're really focused on trying to create at the moment during this return to office phase.
Hamish, will this require a lot of reorientation of leaders and managers on, what to do when people are in office that significantly different from, what they did earlier?
Yeah, fully. This is the shift to hybrid working is the biggest transformation in the way in which we work, organizational transformation, which is the way in which we work in sort of 40, 50 years. And so the change management process that you put around that is absolutely critical. So, it's everything from explaining the why, if you're an organization that's chosen a hybrid, explaining the why of the hybrid model. Why do we want people back in the office? It's not just because, we want to make their lives painful or we don't trust them, because if we didn't trust them, people would be in the office 5 days a week. The reason we want people in office is because we believe there's a value in connectivity. So really explaining to people the why of the office, explain that to managers and getting managers to own those messages, but also working with managers and teams to explain some of the practical things you can do in terms of scheduling your diary to actually equip managers with the tools to have conversations with their teams to make hybrid working work. As you rightly say, if you just saying, hey, you only need to come in 2 days a week, putting in the technology, putting the bills, that's not going to work. You really do need to drive the cultural and behavioral change and equip your managers as the leaders who need to deliver that.
I would imagine so, Hamish. I also agree that it is a huge shift, and I don't think moving to a hybrid workplace is as simple as it's often made out to be. It's far more complex than just defining how many days you need to work in office or home. It's a fundamental reorientation of work itself, and it's going to need a lot of new skills for managers and leaders. Samir, you've heard Shelley and Hamish speak about why the office space is still an important place for building connections and for getting to know each other and collaboration. One of the experiences of many organizations that have tried to get employees back into the office, either a few days a week or more than a few days a week, has been tremendous resistance, where the actual participation of people in office has been far less than perhaps leaders or managers expected or hoped for. What do you think would become compelling reasons for employees to want to come to office, even if it's for a few days?
Well, I think, what Hamish and Shelley just mentioned is absolutely right. Because if an employee is going to travel 2 hours one way to be in office and just do the same work, well, yes, there's going to be the huge resistance. Nobody wants to go to office and do the same work what they're doing at home. But if an employee is going to go to office and probably have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee with colleagues, spend some time, chit chat, maybe whatever else, like share something on whiteboard, they're sitting in a room, sharing ideas. That's what they want to do. And that can never be taken away, right? We are humans at the end of the day. All this digital and everything it sounds great. But at the end of the day, we all are human beings and we need that connect. We survive on that. We survive on relationships. So that is extremely important. That bonding is extremely important. And that's what needs to be enabled. That technology needs to be an enabler to support that mechanism. Just imagine if a manager and a coworker are coming down to office to share some ideas, to share some thoughts, and they write something on whiteboard and again go back. Technology needs to be an enabler to capture that and keep that somewhere so that the rest of the team members who have not been there needs to understand what has happened, and also the manager and the employee can review it whenever they want it. And that's what technology has to be. Technology has to evolve around it. So I think I completely agree with my co-panelists here. The point number one, the office has to be an exciting place for and has to have a genuine reason why the employee need to go back. If they are going to be called back just for some doing same work, what they are able to do remotely, well, it's going to be a huge resistance. We've seen employees leaving. We've heard employees in hundreds leaving a same organization, like hundreds and thousands of employees. They're saying that we don't want to go back. We are happy where we are. But yes, if this is enabled in a proper way, in workplaces transformed into a place where it's used for human connections, building bonds, sharing ideas, and making it very different, then that's what is going to be exciting, and that's what will get people together. And it is the responsibility of technology service providers like Zoom, like us, to ensure that we empower and enable the organizations and support them in this transition. As I said, if people are sitting in office, there's somebody sitting at home. How do we ensure all this happens and is captured somewhere? Or even help with some fun activities in using some digital platforms, something like that. I don't know what the truth is, but let's see where we go from here.
Thank you, Samir. So with that, actually, we come to an end of our conversation today. What I'm amazed at is just how consistent our co-panelists' ideas and thoughts were. I love the fact that all of you are fairly clear that employee expectations have very fundamentally shifted, and that hybrid work from anywhere, or perhaps some form of, largely remote meeting occasionally, some new form of that is likely to be the future. I heard all of you speak about how that means that time in office needs to be spent very differently, and office spaces need to be designed very differently. And that's obviously not going to be very simple. It means, besides the real estate part of it, it means fundamental reorientation for managers, for leaders, and even for employees to make the most of the days when they are present in office to build connections, collaborate, and perhaps even learn from each other. It is a tremendous change management process ahead. And we are probably on the start of something where it's clear that we aren't going to go back to where we were, but yet we're probably going to see many different forms of hybrid or remote, digital, some different formations of all of these modes of working evolve. So I want to thank each of you. It was just an amazing conversation, and thank you for sharing all your ideas. Back to you, Justin.
Please give them a big round of applause once again. Shalini Lal, Hamish, Samir, and Shelley for that engaging session.